Joining us is Andrew Zignani, Senior Research Director at ABI Research. Andrew focuses on wireless connectivity on ABI's Strategic Technologies team. So he's a repeat visitor and a seasoned veteran who's joined us before.
Yeah, hi Dave, great to be here. It's great to connect with you guys again on another Bluetooth topic. Obviously, Bluetooth's doing so many different things and so many different success stories. The shift towards edge AI is becoming extremely important. And Bluetooth obviously has a vital role to play in that, particularly when you're talking about the ambient or very low power devices where they can't be monitored before. So, nobody wants to, go and charge different devices or have to recharge sensors. It would be too costly on maintenance. So if you can have these kind of ambient IoT solutions, which also have a level of intelligence, that really scales up what we talk about as the AI concept of the day. And it's really important to be able to do that and move from the kind of reactive towards decision-centric, approaches.
Yeah, I appreciate you touching on the role that Bluetooth technology can play on the edge. Another area that has come up during these conversations has been around asset tracking and management. I'm curious, what's the data show? Does it support that this is indeed a growing area?
From our perspective, absolutely. For ABI research, we certainly see that. I think there's a whole host of Bluetooth and other, of course, technology location service providers across many different environments. That could be logistics and warehouse. It could be, industrial sites. It could even be healthcare sectors where productivity is important for, can be life critical at some point, right? In terms of enhancing the way in which you could address patients in a certain amount of time. So yeah, we see the huge benefits in overall productivity, obviously staff and visitor safety applications, but also increasing the broader automation, reducing things like asset loss as well, which is a key barrier. Again, I talked about the forklift earlier, but sometimes these items get completely misplaced or lost and no one knows. And then it takes workers, tons of time. It can take them like half an hour or even longer to find an item. So you can have a huge, reduction in search times for some of these asset tracking visibility applications, and really save on cost. And as I touched upon as well, having enhanced visibility also next to you, when you start tagging these items, on forklifts and other items you start to realize what assets you actually have. That there may be some you can reuse. You may not need to invest as much anymore in that you previously wanted to procure some new forklifts or whatever it may be. So you can reduce that operational cost as well, operational expenditure for those types of items as well. So those are real critical. And again, it's not necessarily restricted to one application on the site. If you have a Bluetooth infrastructure, it could be tracking personnel, it could be tracking assets, it could be tracking pallets and other items as well, whether that's inside a warehouse or outside as well, using other techniques as well. And I think obviously the suite of location capabilities that Bluetooth has evolved over time to support obviously higher accuracy and better performance in these harsh industrial environments as well.
Yeah, where do you see the most demand for these asset management solutions? Are there specific environments, the factory, the distribution center, transit, that have been quicker to adopt than others?
Yeah, I think typically or historically, Bluetooth has been very strong in the logistics operations, where there's been, I would say, less criticality when it comes to maybe safety. But and things like latency can play a barrier there, or maybe not necessarily accurate enough. But if you look at logistics, if you're talking about items like forklifts and pallets and larger scale items, then you only need an accuracy within kind of something that's in human vision, right? So you're not going to miss a forklift if it's, if it's saying it's 5 meters away, you're going to be able to see that typically. So it's not necessarily a big challenge there. But what we have seen is that, Bluetooth has improved, obviously, its capabilities in terms of, sub-meter and centimeter level tracking for those applications where you maybe need that more stringency as well. So I think, as well, that there's always been an obsession with the kind of finding the centimeter level precision. But you have thousands of other assets on a site which can enable, as I touched upon earlier, if you have that visibility of those assets and tracking those assets, and you see a bottleneck in the production line, that may be more important than tracking the low latency item, right? So I think that the more assets you can track, and if you can do that at a lower cost with battery free, even better, ambient harvesting of light sources and other capabilities. If you can do that on a much greater scale, the more devices you have in that visibility, or you have visibility of, it is extremely important. So the more you can track, the better the outcome is going to be overall. So yeah, I think there's multiple different applications. I think we've seen it in obviously machinery and pallets and things like that. Personnel is obviously extremely important in ensuring the worker safety, but also optimizing their work processes as well. So I think it's a combination, and I think having the versatile platform of Bluetooth RTLS can enable those multiple different aspects as well.
Yeah, what do you see on the longer term horizon here in this area?
One kind of key new opportunity that we see emerging in the longer term is smart labels. So the kind of passive stickers or other active stickers or labels that we see embedded on a much wider range of assets across the supply chain. So not necessarily just at the logistics side, but it could be within packages, for example, or at the item level, which is a huge extension of the visibility across end to end, right? So that could be material sourcing, it could be at the package that's delivered to an end user and they scan it and it's that they approve it or whatever it may be. It can ensure that things aren't counterfeited as well. So I think we're starting to see huge volumes now in that sector. We're talking about huge projects of tens of millions of units, hundreds of millions of units. But if you're looking at the addressable market for smart labels, you're talking about tens of billions of units of items, right? Even more potentially. So that's where I think there's a lot of innovation happening. There's going to be a lot of different approaches to that going forward. But I think that's one area where Bluetooth is really innovating on, and there's a huge potential market to ensure the visibility. And it's not just visibility of the assets, it's combining it with temperature, it's combining it with humidity to reduce spoilage and waste, and enhancing the sustainability of different operations. Again, anti-counterfeiting to ensure that the good you're getting is the right one as well. So all of that end-to-end visibility is important to ensure that it's not just what happens on site, it's what happens off site as well, and what happens across the whole supply chain. So for me, smart labels is one of those key drivers, absolutely.
And you've also mentioned in previous conversations about this idea of scaling up from single deployments to facility-wide deployments and even beyond. Can you talk a little bit more about that trend?
Yeah, no, exactly. As I touched upon, so a lot of vendors, they typically, or a lot of industrial or logistics operations, they tend to trial a technology out, and they have a single, maybe it's a single RTLS use case that they may use for tracking, for example, forklifts, as I said, right? But then what they find is that there are other aspects of operations that they also want to track as part of that. So the ability or Bluetooth kind of both its presence in existing infrastructure. So you have a lot of Wi-Fi access points that have Bluetooth. You had a lot of Bluetooth industrial gateways on site as well, which are extremely important. You obviously have smartphones and other industrial equipment that has Bluetooth. So you can have obviously RTLS tracking deployments. You can have obviously smart labels, obviously incorporating in that ecosystem as well. You can also have workers that are equipped with tags and wearable and clothing as well to monitor their position. And you can then extend that platform, right, because it's interoperable. Bluetooth is obviously strength is in its own interoperability. You have an infrastructure which can support lots of different services. So that infrastructure acts as a kind of backbone network for multiple different types of industrial productivity gains. And I think that's really compelling. And if you're looking to deploy technology, you want something that's going to be future-proof, you want something that's going to be secure, but you also want that versatility in terms of use cases. So as we know, Bluetooth has lots of different topologies and architectures. It could be a point-to-point, a smartphone or a HMI device interacting with a piece of equipment. It could be RTLS at scale for direction finding. It could be, even PAWR for large-scale sensor monitoring in different applications on top of that, as well as things like mesh for certain deployments as well. So that versatility, as well as the interoperability, it enables multi-vendor choice as well. So you can choose the right components. You don't have to be locked in from maybe as you would be from a proprietary solution. And one of the big challenges is obviously integrating into the OT and IT system. And if you have an interoperable technology that can communicate with lots of different aspects of the operational side, then that makes things a lot easier. And scaling up those operations has been one of the key challenges. So yeah, having a flexible interoperability technology that's trusted and secure is vital for these operation enhancements. And speeding up the deployment over time as well.
Another shift that's happening is one that's taking maintenance from reactive to predictive. From your perspective, how significant is predictive maintenance in improving the overall productivity and resilience of operations?
Yeah, I think this is a huge trend, and I think if you're looking at some of the main use cases now for AI in industrial applications, it's obviously for that precisely that, right? Is to be able to predict well in advance of any issues that are occurring. But as I said before, I touched on AI, but you really still need these items to be connected. And the more and more things you do have connected, the greater visibility and the greater potential you have for to be more proactive rather than reactive. And I think it's also not just the proactive nature, but it's also shifting that decision making to the device as well, or maybe lowering the latency of that. Because it's, as I said before, what you have with Bluetooth is you can enable a whole host of new range of devices that could be, you can share information, incorporate predictive and preventative maintenance, and then obviously that increases the safety of the facility on top of that as well. And that applies to industrial, it applies to manufacturing sites. It could be commercial refrigeration. So if you have an issue with a refrigerator, and it goes wrong, then obviously you have a huge potential for food wastage or medical wastage as well. So having that visibility across the supply chain is extremely important. And we see a whole host of vendors now incorporate Bluetooth in their kind of industrial sensor equipment as well. So again, the benefits are kind of obvious. You have ultra low power, so you can have it running at all times, basically, without the need to power it continuously. And these things can detect, minor vibrations from audio detection and things like that. So as I said before, if a bearing is about to fail, you can really detect that well in advance. But also you have up to 15 years of operation in some regards as well. So that could be the lifespan of the actual piece of equipment that you're monitoring. So the more you sensorize, the more you get out of your equipment, the more productive the equipment is as well, and the more the less wastage you have as well. It is extremely important.
Yeah, I love how you've said it before. Once you're reacting, it's already too late, right? And I'm curious, what's the forecast look like? Are there specific device types or equipment type that is benefiting most from these predictive maintenance capabilities? Where are you seeing the biggest difference being made?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we see a lot of opportunity in the kind of vibration sensors for things like motors and pumps, but there's also large scale equipment like fans and anything that has a kind of point of failure, right? Potentially that could go wrong. That's extremely important to have that, and I think it's a combination of not just measuring one metric. It could be vibration, but it could also be temperature monitoring as well. It could be leak detection as well. It could be other capabilities. So. And this extends to not just the larger scale equipment. It could be an AGV, for example. It could be robotics. It could be other machinery in those applications. And again, having that extended battery life is important. But yeah, it could be there's such a diverse range of equipment within an industrial site or a logistics operation, where even one small component or one small part of the link in the chain, if that breaks, there's huge potential for something to go wrong down the line. On top of that as well. So it could be conveyors, it could be pumps, it could be motors. There's a whole host of really unlimited really type of applications that you want to monitor. We see lots of storage tanks and everything else that want to be monitored as well. There's such a diversity, and I think that's where the flexibility of Bluetooth comes in, and also the retrofit capability as well. So it's not just new equipment you can track, it's obviously maybe some of the older equipment that needs to be monitored as well, which is extremely important. On top of that as well, and also monitoring personnel is extremely important as well in terms of if they're exposed to hazardous environments, enabling to work more flexibly, detecting gas and other potential hazardous environments within industrial sites, especially if they work more remotely, is critical, right? So having a sensor which could then maybe pair with your smartphone or pair with the operator's HMI or portable PC could really alert them in some safety-related applications as well, which is extremely important.
Yeah, it's like it's a perfect segue into the next topic that I wanted to ask you about. It's like you're the guest and the producer at the same time. So productivity is often framed around output, and understandably so. But as you just touched on, safety and workforce experience are just as critical. So what does your research show about the relationship between worker safety and operational performance?
Yeah, I think there's making sure that personnel are safe is extremely important. Obviously, I think that's one area in which you can improve productivity, but also having the flexibility to operate machinery remotely is also very important. Not just a case of tracking what the personnel are doing, but also giving them that flexibility for either that's programming an AGV or a robot in an industrial environment, so they don't have to necessarily be walking alongside it. It could be, for example, a piece of a large scale machinery that has lots of moving parts. You don't necessarily want to stand next to that and be able to have to monitor the different metrics within that piece of machinery. So having maybe a HMI, for example, which enables that user to monitor that remotely, or even it could be done directly to the cloud as well. It could be extremely important in reducing the exposure of those personnel to some of those more, should we say, dangerous environments or potentially hazardous environments within those sectors as well. I touched upon some of the kind of the portable solutions, the wearable solutions, for example, like the gas detectors. They can have things like man down status. They have alarms inbuilt in them. Again, a lot of this is important not just for obviously for safety, but also for compliance purposes as well, right? To make sure that your operations are safe. And the greater you can automate those different aspects, whether that's compliance, it could be for RTLS, it could also be the worker roll call and making sure that everyone's present if there is an incident as well. If you can automate some of those processes, that's important. It was used in COVID, obviously, for contact tracing and even social distancing to a certain extent as well. So that's a kind of initial proof of concept for the safety applications in the industrial site. But there's a whole host, right, when it comes to the better enhanced automation in tracking the environment. Is the environment too hot, for the worker to be working in for the amount of time they're in as well? Is that worker too close to another object within the facility as well? How can you help optimize those aspects as well? I think it's extremely important. But then ensuring that also the equipment is stored in the right environment as well. It can be critical as well for wider safety down the line. For example, food safety, for example, pharmaceuticals, right? If you can determine if something's is spoiled well ahead of time before it reaches even the customer, then it's a huge benefit and a huge safety benefit as well. And especially as you get to the kind of item level tracking we talked about for smart tags and labels, especially if they incorporate sensors and temperature and humidity sensors for spoilage and wastage as well, cold chain monitoring or frozen items as well. All of those are extremely important in both the kind of worker and personnel safety, but also the end user safety as well.
So you may have already touched on this answer, but across all of these different applications and all these different areas, where do you see the largest volume and momentum?
Yeah, so in terms of volume, I think what we've seen historically to date has been the RTLS solutions, real-time locating solutions. The amount of assets that you need to monitor within these sites. You're talking about thousands, hundreds of thousands on maybe in a logistics environment. That's where Bluetooth has been really strong to date, and I think that's been compounded by the recent enhancements to the location capabilities of Bluetooth, obviously evolving from RSSI towards higher accuracy solutions as well. I think one of the fastest growing segments we do see is in condition monitoring. It may not be the highest volume, but the increased sensorization combined again with Edge AI, which I think is going to be the next wave, or at least enable the next wave, is going to be extremely critical. So the combination of Edge AI with low power Bluetooth can really start to accelerate that demand and deployment of the condition-based monitoring and predictive maintenance solutions, going forward as well. What we've seen with some technologies, like private 5G, obviously had a lot of hype around it. But when you're talking about enabling all these assets, what you need these assets is to be connected, and you can't do that if your tag that you're using to do that costs $50 or $100. What you need is these lower cost solutions to scale that up, and I think that's why Bluetooth has been one of the more preemptive technologies, in the asset tracking space in particular. And of course, by far the largest volumes is within smart labels and logistics tracking for those type of applications. Again, we're already looking at volumes that are already dwarfing the existing RTLS market. It's huge, and we're so immature in terms of where we are on that market segment, even in terms of awareness of that as well. So, but what we're seeing is these partnerships starting to form, where you have potentially hundreds of millions of tags of smart labels, that are enabling much wider tracking across the end-to-end supply chain operations. So once if that's where we are today, if we're already at hundreds of millions, you can easily see within the next 5 to 10 years, we're talking about tens of billions of devices or tens of billions of materials and assets that can be monitored across the supply chain. So that's very much where I'm excited about in terms of the next wave of Bluetooth.
Looking ahead, maybe 5-10 years, right? What are the trends that will stand the test of time?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. So we know that obviously lots of enterprises are investing huge amounts into digital transformation. This trend is not going to go away. I think, according to ABI, I think it's 225 billion will be spent this year on digital transformation across industrial environments. So there's huge incentives there. Again, it's being compounded by these edge AI capabilities, and I think that's one shift in which what we see. One accelerating trend is what's happening there with the embedding of low power, reliable, robust connectivity with edge AI capabilities to enable greater decision making and more autonomous decision making at the edge. And I think that's one trend that's going to stay and also help accelerate the market. I think RTLS is definitely here to stay, not just through the enhanced capabilities, but also the fact that people are starting to really understand the ROI. And once you have that initial visibility, to scale it up across multiple different sites or multiple different use cases in an industrial environment, identifying new bottlenecks, automating or improving the work processes as well is extremely important. So I think that's a trend that's going to absolutely continue. And I think the growing diversity of Bluetooth in terms of industrial applications, we talked about condition-based monitoring sensors, smart labels, of course, in terms of a volume perspective, is a trend that's here to stay. And we're still very much on the early adoption cycle of that aspect. But I think, what we see across the board is greater investment in digitalization, the ability to track not just one item or one aspect of the operations, but having a converged platform which can support personnel tracking, item tracking, supply chain tracking, smart label monitoring, connecting your tools and equipment. Once you have that visibility and you can kind of automate all of that, whether that's through the cloud or hybrid AI approaches as well, that's where the true shift will occur as well. And I think the IoT has been around for some time now, but I think this next wave, when you incorporate, edge AI with the enhanced capabilities that these devices can that can incorporate, as well as what Bluetooth vendors are doing to improve range, to improve security, to improve reliability and robustness, to work in harsh industrial environments, to reduce the latency, to improve the throughput. All of these things will make Bluetooth even more compelling, over time. And of course, Bluetooth will work with other technologies. There's lots of different technologies in this space, and Bluetooth can help augment, those different technologies as well to really drive that transformation towards increased digitization as well. So I think, from my perspective, all of it is here to stay. I think we'll see some markets go faster than others, but anything that can enhance the visibility, can streamline operational efficiency, increase the safety, increase compliance, the automation of that compliance, procedure as well, to give you better, more sustainable operations, safer operations, and just more productive operations and more intelligent operations is where we see that the fundamental transition still occurring.
The last couple of questions I have is around the benefits of all of this, and not just within individual facilities, but beyond. So what happens when small productivity improvements are replicated across thousands of facilities and across supply chains?
It's enormous. It's enormous. So I think when we did some calculations a few months, or I think maybe last year, if you actually look at, for example, the benefits of RTLS deployments, you're talking about hundreds of billions of savings when you talk about operational efficiencies, when you talk about lost items being found, when you talk about reductions in, for example, collisions and worker safety applications, insurance, and everything else there. If you can take one facility and it can be a millions of dollars saving, right? If you prevent an accident or if you prevent the loss of an extremely valuable asset or piece of equipment, that if you extrapolate that globally, to all the different types of operational efficiencies you can gather, it's really hard to quantify, all these different, cost savings and operational efficiencies, because they all kind of compound each other. And I think that once you have that initial visibility and you extend that to other operations, you discover more as that evolves. And where we are in terms of deployments today, it may be the case where a facility just deploy that for one or two parts of their operations. What we're seeing now in the next wave is the scaling up to maybe individual sites, and then beyond that to the whole end-to-end operations. And when you have visibility of the end-to-end operations, combining with the machine learning and intelligence there, you're going to be able to automate and understand, much greater range of potential issues, along the supply chain, right? So that's only going to compound over time with the greater monitoring and greater visibility. But ultimately, you still need these things to be connected. And there are many technologies that are as scalable in terms of cost and can enable the power consumption and versatility of Bluetooth. to enable that much more scalable type of visibility across multiple different areas.
So being that industry is really kind of the engine that drives the world forward, if productivity improvements scale across factories, supply chains, production networks, what broader impacts do you think emerge, not just for industry, but for people and the planet?
Yeah, I think there's tons that come to mind, but I think at the moment resilience is key. I think obviously we see some huge issues at the moment around the world with different not just conflicts, but also geopolitical trends as well. So having greater resilience in your end-to-end supply chain visibility is important, because that not only leads to production and efficiency enhancements at the factory floor, but also things like energy supply and everything else there, right? So all these things compound each other over time. I think it's not just it's the compliance side of things, I think, is extremely important as well. So the transition towards more sustainable operations is extremely important. If you know where the materials are sourced and it can guarantee that, that's extremely important in making sure that it's being sourced sustainably. And also, reducing the power usage and automating different aspects of the production line as well. Reducing wastage obviously can contribute to more sustainable operations and reduce losses as well as reducing the waste in terms of machinery that breaks down too quickly and the need to replace old machinery. So if you can extend the lifespan of that equipment and machinery as well, it's not just good to reduce downtime, but also from a sustainability perspective, it's also critical in extending the life cycle of those devices as well, and not needing to replace them and create new components on top of that as well.
Yeah, this has been a really helpful way to kind of step back and look at industrial productivity through a broader lens, and your view really helps put a lot of these productivity conversations into context. So it's been great having you kind of help frame what matters most, moving forward. I really appreciate you spending time with us today.
No, I really appreciate the time and the discussion. I think I think Bluetooth continues to evolve, as we know. I think we're going to see more and more solutions that are tailored to the industrial environment as well. And of course, I touched upon the increased convergence with the edge AI capabilities. All of that is going to really help to enable Bluetooth to realize its potential in lots of these different applications, but also help industrial sites and facilities, logistic operations, also enable much more intelligent and smarter environments as well on top of that. So I'm really excited to see what the next 5 to 10 years is going to bring in terms of innovation for Bluetooth in industrial environments as well. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you. And until next time.
Indeed, till the next one. Take care.